Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, I'm going to give you my top 5 winter flowering plants, or plants that have a tendency to want to flower during the winter months. I realize I'm kind of lucky to even be talking about this. I'm in Zone 7B in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm in an urban area, and it's probably more like Zone 8 where I'm living. And it's a week before Christmas, and I have on shorts, long sleeve shirt, but I have on shorts, and so I realize a lot of you are not going to have things flowering necessarily in the dead of winter who are watching this, but I can here. So I'm going to go through some of those things that are my favorites, leaving lots of things off. I mean, we can grow pansies and snapdragons through the winter here, and they're blooming now in my yard. Of course, flowering cabbage and kale, which isn't technically a flower. They eventually put up a flower, but what we're looking at with that purple is not a flower, but they look like flowers, and so they're great for winter color. Deciduous magnolias are amongst my favorite plants. The J.C. Ralston Arboretum over here has one of their best collections, probably in the country, and they're blooming in February every year. I left those off the list. Loropetalum behind me. Many times I've seen snow on Loropetalum while they're flowering in late February or early March. It's in the witch hazel family, and of course witch hazel is a winter flowering shrub typically. First few warm nights, after mid-January into February, you're going to see the witch hazel blooming. I've got a Farfujium over here that I left off the list, a tractor seat plant that's still blooming in my yard. It's almost finished up, but it's a week before Christmas, and it's still flowering. What else have I missed? Winter jasmine, the yellow flowering jasmine. It's kind of a sprawling thing. I'm not a huge fan of it. If you have a slope, though, that's a great plant on a slope, and I typically I get questions about what to plant on slopes, and then not every plant pops in my mind when I get a question, and winter jasmine would be a great choice if you have a difficult area that you're trying to control some erosion on. And it flowers in the winter time, which is super interesting. I got one up the street right now that's blooming almost in December. More typically, they'll bloom toward the end of January or early February here. What else am I missing? Two of my favorite plants I'm leaving off this list, Edgeworthia or paper bush, and winter daphne. I'm leaving both of those off the list mainly because they can be kind of fickle plants to grow. And I didn't want to make a list of fickle plants, and more expensive plants. Those typically are a little more expensive. They're definitely worth it. And for experienced gardeners that know how to elevate their plants a little bit, don't plant them too deep, and don't over mulch them, don't overwater them. They're easy plants to love to death. If you can avoid that, then winter daphne and paper bush or Edgeworthia should definitely be on your list of plants to get. And there's even more. I probably haven't, if I said here, thought about it long enough, plants that have a tendency to bloom in the winter. But I'm going to get to the 5 that I started the video for right now. Number 1 here is going to be this Osmanthus Fragrance. It doesn't have to be just Osmanthus Fragrance. Almost all the Osmanthus have a tendency they bloom in the cool season. This one right here has been blooming. It's got flower buds all along the stems right now. Super fragrant evergreen. It's been blooming since probably early October. The worst of the winter will shut it down, and then sometime in February, whatever residual buds that haven't opened up on it yet will open up at that time. And so super long bloomed as well. But any of the Osmanthus, there's variegated Osmanthus, and just a big group of plants that are available. Some are slightly more cold hardy than others. If you live in colder areas, this Osmanthus Fragrance, definitely at the top of where it will grow. It's a Zone 7 evergreen shrub, but just a great choice for winter flowers and fragrance in the garden. So that was Osmanthus at number 5. Number 4 is actually Mahonia, and I never thought I'd put Mahonia on a top 5 list. The old varieties of Mahonia we have here are actually invasive plants. They're coming up all over the wooded spaces around me, and are actually, like I say, noxious weeds. But we've seen lots of new Mahonias released here in the last 10 years that are not. And I've got Marvel Mahonia in my yard back here. I've got Soft Caress Mahonia, and they're both in bloom here a week before Christmas. They're just absolutely fantastic plants. Virtually no maintenance. They're part shade or shade-loving evergreen shrubs, which is just kind of hard to find for you know, for something that's going to give you lots and lots of color. The pollinators absolutely love these plants, and they're blooming at a time when nothing else is blooming typically for the pollinators, and so it's just, you know, it's a nice little boost for them typically in January and February and into early March. That's number 4. Number 3 is Pieris Japonica, or Japanese Andromeda, some people call it, or Japanese Pieris. I've got a variety called Mountain Snow in the backyard. There's lots and lots of varieties that get 12 feet tall, down to varieties that only get 3 or 4 feet tall, like Mountain Snow. Just great plants. They're ericaceous plants, and this is another one that you're going to have to be careful with, not planting it too deep, and putting it in any kind of clay bowl in the ground. If you have clay soils, make sure you're letting it dry out. This is another part shade or shade evergreen shrub, and it happens to bloom in, you know, late January, early February in my area. Those of you who are in like 7A or 6B or 5, it's probably going to be sometime in later February before they bloom, but they are fantastic plants, and many of them have amazing new growth on them in the spring, reds and burgundies and intense colors. And then the flower colors are, the flowers are going to be white or pink or even reddish in tone. Like I say, lots of different varieties of Japanese Pieris. Okay, so Pieris is number 3. Number 2 is definitely going to be Hellebores or Lenten roses for me. I absolutely love them. I'm going to go back up to Pine Knot when they have an open weekend in February and continue my collection of Hellebores. That's a mail order company that you can use to order Hellebores. It's just nothing. I mean, they're just fantastic, and we've seen through breeding now we have variegated foliage on them, and we have the flowers more upright. They're being selected. All the new varieties are being selected so we can actually see the flowers. Older Hellebores, the flowers just have to kind of hang down, so you have to kind of go over to them and pull them up and look at them. Not anymore. Lots of the new varieties are showy from across the yard. Again, you know, an evergreen perennial that blooms in the wintertime. Just fantastic. I have videos on my channel for how to increase the flowering by pruning them in the late winter before they get started blooming. Typically in January, I'll go and clean out the old foliage off of them, but I do have a video on my channel for that. And number 1 on my list probably won't surprise anyone because I have tons of videos on my channel for them, is Camellias. Lots of different types of Camellias. In this yard, primarily, I've got Camellias sasanquas and Camellia japonicas. Camellias sasanquas tend to be fall blooming. Camellia japonicas are after Christmas, typically up through March or even into early April. Although through some plant breeding, I've got one in my yard called Early Wonder that actually blooms in the fall. And they can just kind of open up flowers. Camellia japonicas can just kind of open up flowers whenever we get a few warm nights. That typically is how they'll go. They'll get a big freeze, and any of the open flowers or buds will get knocked back and killed, but the buds that are still tight on them will just open later in the winter or early spring. But Camellias have always been my favorite. They're hardy in zone 7 to 9. They're evergreen. They're tough as nails. Once they're established, really no maintenance on them. And they offer color, and interesting color, at a time of year when, like I said, very little is going to be blooming in your yard. I say hardy in zone 7 to 9. There are a couple different series, a winter series Camellias that are hardy into zone 6, and you may want to. Camellia Forest would be a good source for there in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, for mail order Camellias. And I did a video there maybe a year and a half, or it wouldn't be a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that I showed some of those winter series Camellias there, so I know that they have them. So again, I do feel fortunate to live in an area where I can talk about being able to get things to flower during the winter months. Typically, you know, if it gets that first week or 2 of January, when we actually get our coldest temperatures of the winter, nothing's going to be blooming. Very little is going to be blooming other than pansies. And then, you know, by mid-January, all of these things that I'm talking about tend to be throwing some color here and there. So thank you very much for watching this video. I might make a second video with my next favorite 5. I don't know. Thanks for watching.